The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready for Insights to Incite? Ready or not, it's showtime. Now get ready to listen in and watch right here on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Join us and together we will escape the mundane. Insights to Incite, here is your host, Brandon Lawson.
Hello. This quality, I like to think of it in light of, I see it as one that is often referenced in a vain light, and yet it's one that actually radiates a true, genuine brightness from the inside out. And what's more, this quality just might shine brighter, radiating a greater, more vivid beauty than any other quality one can personally possess. The fact is, no matter who we are or how pretty or handsome one might be outwardly, the reality is, without it, you and I will be unattractive, and at times, we may very well be downright ugly. Yes. Friends, let's learn about this. Let's learn to become more like this today and moving forward. Today is Thursday, July 1st, and I want to thank all my viewers and listeners for joining us here. We are here every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern, and if by chance you miss our show, you can find us on basically any platform out there that you access your podcasts. You should be able to find us by searching Insights to Incite, as you should if you're on on Talk4 TV where you can see us. You should be able to see in the top left-hand corner of the screen live Insights to Incite, INSIGHTS, then the number 2, just one character, not spelled out with 3 letters, and then Incite, INCITE. But I want to thank all of you for joining us. And today we are in lesson 13 in our series, Matters That Matter. And so what quality is it? What quality enables and empowers us to shine and radiate ever so vividly, yet without it, it ruins and even rips out and rips from us the ability to be attractive or to attract much of anything good. Any thoughts? Friends, I'm speaking of humility. I mean, think about those people who are humble. And then, maybe there's several, but think of one or two and just ponder for a moment, what about them? How are they? What do you see in them? When you look at them, what about them seems to distinguish themselves from the rest of the pack? And then you're bound to know some others who are flat out arrogant, almost to the other extreme, And when you think of them, what is it about them? What things do they do, or how do they act, or, what do you see in them? Me, I think there's a lot that we can see in those who are humble or arrogant. But today I want to really focus in on those people whose personality, whose character, could say exemplifies or epitomizes humility. So, as we think of these folks, there's certain qualities about them, certain things that I believe you'll find of people who are humble. And these things that I want to share with you are, while they're very true of people who are humble, I would say they're also the things that I will list here. The people of humility are grasps this, or it's more uh, easily comes to them than most of society or most of anyone else we see when we look at different categories or different types of people. And first, I would say that people of humility, you'll find that they are more so than most people are content. And contentment, it's often mistaken with the word satisfied. And while at times it could be used like in place of one another, be interchangeable, but the fact of the matter is you can be content and simultaneously unsatisfied. Contentment has to do with the present, where being satisfied or unsatisfied takes into account the future. And for instance, you may own a business and you may have just recently started it in the last year and a half, and you might be content in the the progress you're making. You're growing, and that. But does that mean you're satisfied where it is? No. You still want it to grow. You want it to advance. You want to, build it more. You hope it continues to expand and become bigger and better. Or church leaders. You might be content with how the body is, the congregation you help lead. You might be content with maybe you have a fundraiser because you're looking to build a new building because you've grown. That's things to be happy about. You can find contentment in those. But does that mean you're satisfied where you are, and that could be your cap, and you don't need to expand or don't need your cap to rise any higher? I doubt it. So here, people of humility, they find contentment, they find joy in the present. And in doing so, you'll find they have a greater peace and a greater strength. And this is like a quiet strength. We're not talking about, physical muscles or anything like that, how much you can lift or what you can pull. We're talking about people, as you're humble, you can, like if someone just lays into you, and it could very well be for no good reason. They might be just totally arrogant, and they lay into you, and to not rise up to defend yourself or to go at them, to just be quiet and take it in, that takes a strong person, very strong person. When you know that someone is just outright rude and being mean and nasty, especially when there's no merit to it, it's totally undeserved. Yet people who are humble have a way of doing that. They have that strength that comes in the form of restraining themselves. They keep themselves, they lay low. Similar to the Greek word that's often used in the New Testament it's translated as patience. And that Greek word is hypomene. The first part of that term hypo, means to, like a sub, to remain under, where hyper is over and above. It's just supersede to hippas, to remain under, to lay low. And it means to just be patient, lay low. Don't try to exert yourself to take matters in your own hands. And in the case of being humble, if you're being attacked, it's having that patience, that humility to keep yourself grounded. And in fact, the term humility comes from two Latin terms, humus and humilitas. Humilitas means more about being low, staying lowly, not making a point to exalt yourself. Whereas humus is where we get the word ground. And that means, like, as you think of, you stay grounded. You don't get so lofty and big in yourself that you start to, become so proud and think you're so great. You stay grounded. And again, staying low. And that's with hypomene. You can, it's the ability to remain low, and not just the ability to, but you're actually doing it. As we all know, we can have the ability to do something yet not do it. But they remain low. They stay grounded. And I, don't know that any of the people who are humble actually think of this per se. But I think one thing that comes into play is you think of that first term, humus, meaning ground. You know, it's also, you think of ground like in mud or dirt, on the ground. And, it even says in the book of Job, when Job was going to defend himself and God questioned him, I created the heavens, the earth, the skies. I put all this in motion, and you think that, that I don't know what I'm doing or I can't do what, I've set out to do. This is God talking to Job and then, within that discourse back and forth, it was Job said, it says in the book of Job that from dust I was formed, into dust I will return. God made us, took us from the dust of the earth and breathed life into us. And if we think of, we came from ground, mud, dust, that might help us to be a bit more humble, to not think so that, we have the right to rise up and do something. I mean, not so much that we necessarily think we're so great, because I know my issue when it comes to being humble. Yeah, usually I'm fairly well, unless I'm under attack. I can rise up, or someone does me wrong or cheats me or looks to steal from me or something. I can, and I often am, someone who doesn't really resemble humility too much. I tend to rise up, and if I could just remember that I was made from the dust, and I'm come up from the ground. God breathed life into me. Without Him, I would be nothing. Perhaps I would not be so quick to exalt myself to be there to defend myself. That's generally where I will my pride or my lack of humility is shown. I don't just naturally be mean to others and go around being hateful and thinking I'm better than everyone. But when people attack me, I have an issue. But that is the first thing. Of people of humility are content, and that contentment within there is that peace they have. They don't need to buy the latest thing. They don't need to get this. They don't need to make this much money or live in this house. And you can see within that is a strength, that they have that strength within themselves. And the second thing, I believe, that people of humility do much better and much easier than most of us, most of society, is they're able to grow and mature. Yeah. And we're not talking about learning a skill per se, like it could help you in, doing a certain thing, but just growing, in other, character qualities, things that would make for a mature person. Maybe there's something about them where they're not so much a good listener. And then here, being a person of humility, it's easier for them to adapt and to grow into a person who could be a good, if not great, listener. Whereas if people are so, prideful, they don't have to necessarily be proud. And I believe there's a distinguishment there. Proud is more the arrogant of thinking, I'm so good, and I'm better than the rest of the crowd. It's like looking down on others. But prideful is just, it's something where you won't let yourself be not that we should let ourselves be used or misused or that, but we're real quick to stand our ground and maybe step on someone who tries to harm us. That's that pridefulness rising up. And I'd say that's what I just a minute ago, as I described myself, that might be how I would be. I don't think of myself as being so proud to the point that I think I'm better than anyone, but I do have that pride within me when someone comes at me and does me wrong. So within that, though, when you can remove that from self, that helps you to grow. That helps you to adapt, to allow for change, and change comes much easier. That's what you find. And in fact, as we think of, those who, when we talk about, being able to adapt and grow, as we look here, it has been said Let's find that here. As we think of, the being humble and being able to adapt in that respect, there was a quote I found here that I really think speaks to this very well. And sorry, I find it here. I just had it. Well, I'm going to move on. I can't seem to locate that particular quote, but it speaks to the ability to adapt. But that is, the second thing. They're able to grow and mature much easier. They're able to adapt and make those changes. The third thing, I believe, that people who are humble, you'll find that, they have much more gratitude. And it's not just that they have it within them. It you can see it in them. You see it because we all, I believe, have gratitude in us. It's a matter of will we really allow it out? Is it buried, or do we allow it to come to the forefront? I think people who are humble, as you think of that contentment and finding joy in the present, as I think of the word contentment, that's what I would give my definition of it, is to find joy in the present, to find something good that allows us to be content. But that goes right in with that gratitude. You see that gratitude in them. Then that, comes out, and it helps them as they go through life day to day. You'll find that people of, humility, they are more grateful than many others. And as we consider how, people of humility and being grateful, there's a few things that, you just don't find among most. And, when you have that humility within you, it helps you to consider, to keep things in perspective. So that's the fourth thing. The first is they're more content than most. They're able to grow and mature much easier than most. And you see that gratitude in them, that it comes to the forefront. You notice it, that they have a gratitude, a gratefulness for life and for what it's been given to them. And as a result, that helps them to have a clearer perspective, to see things as they are, and perhaps even see beyond the present. Too many times we can get caught up in what we notice right here, right now. We see what's right in front of us, and based on what is in front of us, I mean, that what we're seeing is real. It's not anything that we didn't see it correctly, but that's all we can see. That causes us to react. And to react is to rise up. You do not remain under. But people who have this humility, being they have that contentment, that peace and strength, being there, which enables them to adapt, to change, to grow and mature. And you see that gratitude that helps to lead them as they go through their life day to day. As a result, they're able to have a greater perspective and perhaps even see beyond the here and now to what could come, and that helps them to be able to, I don't want to say deal with, I don't like the term deal, but helps them to interact better with people and to even do things properly to help resolve issues or to keep issues from even coming. So those are the four things that I think you would notice very easily if you just took the time to pay attention to those who are humble, or even if you thought right now in your mind's eye of those who are humble. What do you see? I think in many cases you'll find these four things in people. And in light of that, I really like what Rob Kish said. And before we get our first commercial break, I just want to read this real quickly. But Rob Kish stated, "Lead with integrity, follow with curiosity, serve with generosity, be with humility, love with humanity." And I believe that says it very well. And when we come back, I'm going to get into some further things that, what humility keeps us from doing, because there's certain things that these are also benefits, but instead of this is what it enables us or empowers us, it keeps us from moving into the things that we shouldn't do. And so we're going to get into that as soon as we come back, and we'll be back in just a minute. Thank you.
Wow, that was insightful. Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net or calling him at 513-520-7597. Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Incite, a real show with real-life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Incite live at noon Eastern Time every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Incite, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
Okay, friends. So we spoke of 4 things that you often see that could be identified in people who are humble. Those 4 things tend to epitomize a person of humility. And another side of this that is what humility keeps us from doing. And I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it helps us to remain under, keeps us from rising up to retaliate. But also, as humility tends to, set in and sort of become grounded, soaked up within our soul, become really a part of who we are, then, it isn't even so much that it's, a reminder comes to our mind that says, don't rise up. It's just we don't even have the desire to. And so that's the first thing I want to speak of what it keeps us from doing. It has a way of, humility is not just something that's a here and there, a hit and miss with us, but becomes sort of a defining characteristic. It strips us of a desire to, take revenge against people. We don't even want to do that when humility is real in us. Whereas if pride is there, you hurt me, pride says, I'm having none of this. How about I show you what it feels like? Well, humility goes, no, I don't even want to go that way. It doesn't even think of bringing that in. Well, when I say it doesn't think, I mean, it's not to say it never comes to mind to a person of humility, because that would be almost, not being a real human of such. But it's much easier, and it doesn't come up all the time nearly as much. So humility, as it becomes a part of us, as it's truly, soaks itself within us. It's not just something in our pocket we take out here and there, but it's a defining characteristic. It strips us of the desire for revenge. And second, as we think of this, idea of being, humble, is it takes away a selfishness. Selfishness has a way of corrupting, has a way of setting us above others. And as we think of this selfishness, as it is stripped and goes away, that is, what I believe is one of the defining characteristics of human, of a human who is humble. And like right here, it was said by, let's see, it was Fulton J. Sheen said, humility is dependence on God, as pride is independence of Him. The humble soul is always the thankful soul. And so there, you see that. And then Andrew Murray said, humility is nothing but the disappearance of self in the vision that God is all. As we think of that, humility has a way of stripping our, self from the picture. It's not to say that, if you're humble and humility becomes a part of you, that you're just going to let yourself be walked on, but you're less likely to rise up and to take matters in your own hands, whether it's on the side of revenge or even just, being generous. Generosity is a form of humility. It's you could say a fruit of humility. It's when you are humble, you're more apt to be generous. You're less likely to be stingy. You think less of yourself, or you shouldn't say you think less of yourself. It was better said, it's as C.S. Lewis put it. He stated, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And so that's where this comes in. When you think of that, in humility, it strips us of that desire to take revenge or to be thinking of me, me, me. And so we consider that, one of the things that causes us to think of me, 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 or as the saying goes, me, myself, and I, is when we're been hurt a lot. We naturally have a sort of walk around with a guarded stance. It becomes who we are because we don't want to be hurt. I mean, no one does. And as a result, as much as you don't want to be, someone who lacks humility, that's often what comes into play, or that's often what grows out of that, because you're thinking of yourself. And this is something that I myself have struggled with. It's, again, I don't think I'm better than others per se, but I have at times carried a guarded stance because of what someone has done to me, especially if I know I'm going back to that setting. Like say it's work. I can't just quit a job because, this person, how they are. And, and can't always rely on your boss or the employer to, get that person to stop or to put them in a different department, in a different shift. That's out of your hands. And you can't just quit your job and say, well, I'll be good and, we'll find a way to make ends meet. I mean, some people might have the savings to do it, but generally speaking, you can't just kick your job to the curb. And so you have to go back to that. And then you would be guarded more because you don't want to be hurt, and that person who's hurt you is already there. And they're going to be there again, more than likely. So, as we think of that, the person of humility is more about others. And what you find will flow out of that from the standpoint of not being so, caught up in yourself, is not just a generosity, but even a charisma. Charisma actually means, or actually the word grace comes from the term charisma. Charisma actually means the gift of grace. And so as you think of someone who is not caught on self, but other people minded, outward focused, looks for the best interest of others. People are often drawn to that. And we think of that, grace as it's often defined as unmerited favor. It's undeserved. It's not merited. It's not warranted, whether it be some stranger helps you out and they don't even know you, or it could be someone harmed you and, and they forgave you something you did that was outright wrong. We're not talking about accidentally bumping someone as you didn't see them, you turned and they turned and your elbow hit their elbow. But we're talking about something that was deliberately done and someone let it go. That's that unmerited favor. And you think of those ideas of, when you show that kind of favor to others, people are drawn to you. That's what charisma is about. Charisma is where people are drawn to others who are known for their charisma. And humility allows for that. If you are so stuck on yourself, so prideful, so proud, charisma's not going to be there. So, as we think of that, that leads us to the question of why. Why is it we can struggle with being humble? Why is it that it can be very difficult to be that way? And I've sort of hinted at one reason already when I said about when you get hurt a lot, that pride comes in, not necessarily on the side of arrogance, but just you're on the defense, you're guarded, you're on the outlook, not wanting to be hurt. And so who are you thinking of at that point? You're thinking of yourself. And so that would be one of the other things as we consider why it can be a struggle to be a person of humility. But there's more as well. And I want to get into those, and share those few on the latter part of our show here, because I know we only have roughly 12 minutes or so left. But first, we're going to step away to our second commercial break. But before we do, I'd like to share with you what Jim Rohn said. Jim Rohn, he's speaking of the paradox of leadership. And as he stated in his message here, the challenge of leadership is to be strong but not rude, to be kind but not weak, to be humble but not timid. Friends, we'll be right back.
Wow, that was insightful. Stay tuned as we go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insights to Incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Are you seeking a speaker or coach who speaks life into your people? If so, look no further. Brandon Lawson is one who will inspire and motivate his audience, as well as empathize and relate to all. Reach out to Brandon and let him be your speaker and life coach by sending an email to brandon@connectandimpact.net or calling him at 513-520-7597. Brandon looks forward to speaking with you, to you, and for you. Let's connect and impact today. Insights to Incite, a real show with real-life messages. This show, which can be found on radio, TV, and our podcast, gives us insight to incite us to action and to excellence. Watch and or listen to Insights to Incite live at noon Eastern Time every Thursday on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Check out our past episodes on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Join us each week, and together we will escape the mundane. We are back with more Insights to Incite, so get ready and tune in to listen and watch. Now, once again, let's join Brandon Lawson.
So, as we think of this characteristic of humility, and we spoke of what characteristics epitomize a person's humility, and now we're speaking of the different things that humility helps us in the form of stripping us or taking away from us things that would be wrong, rude, would be something we shouldn't do, and humility has a way of keeping us from that. And we spoke of those, and we spoke of, now we're into why is it that it can be a struggle to be humble. And we talked about being hurt a lot. I mean, that in itself has a way of making you think of yourself because you're on guard from others. But what else does it do? Well, as we think of the struggle, besides the being hurt and what's been done to you, when we think of what we have a choice in the matter, because what's done to us is basically out of our control. We can try to keep ourselves out of that, that environment or where those people are, as much as we can, but we're not always able to. But this other is something we can have total power or total control over it. And that is, what do we take in? Are we watching things that could even be the shows? Are they about violence? I know many kids, especially with video games. Video games are just outright horrible, the kind of junk you see and the influence that comes out of that. But what are you absorbing, taking in? We've all heard that, that acronym GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Or you could look at it the other way, good in, good out. But point is, it's what we take in has a way of you know, it's part of the ingredients in the recipe that forms who we are. And that, from that standpoint, is what we breathe out. What comes out of us? What is the person that is portrayed, who we epitomize as we go forth? So as we think of things we have control over in terms of, what we can do, because humility it's of God, but, we're all of the flesh. Even those of us who have put on Christ have struggles, and the flesh is always at war, wanting to rise up against us. And, the scripture even speaks to that. Paul himself, he's had a whole chapter where he spoke of how, his struggle, as much as he desired to do good, and as he tried to do good, bad always set in. He always ended up doing wrong. And then as he tried to correct that and then overdo that, then, that flesh overtook him. And it was a constant, war waging back and forth. You find that in Romans 7. And I'm not going to read that entire chapter, but the very next chapter, I do want to hint at some verses here in Romans 8. I'm going to turn to. In Romans 8 here, this is right after Paul talks about his ongoing struggle with sin and how flesh and the spirit, were at war. In fact, I'm going to read part of chapter 7. If we look in chapter 7, starting in verse 19, it says, "For I do not do the good that I want to do, but I practice the evil that I do not want to do. Now, if I do what I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but it is the sin that lives in me. So I discover this principle. When I want to do what is good, evil is with me. For in my inner self, I joyfully agree with God's law. But I see a different law in the parts of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and taking me prisoner to the law of sin in the parts of my body. What a wretched man I am! Who will rescue me from this dying body? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, with my mind, I myself am a slave to the law of God, but with my flesh to the law of sin." And then the very next chapter, in verse 8, it speaks, I'll just start at the beginning of the chapter. Verse 1, "Therefore no condemnation now exists for those in Christ Jesus, because the Spirit's law of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and of death. What the law could not do, since it was limited by the flesh, God did. He condemned sin in the flesh by sending his own Son in flesh like ours, under sin's domain and as a sin offering, in order that the law's requirement would be accomplished in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh think about the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit about the things of the Spirit. For the mindset of the flesh is death, but the mindset of the Spirit is life and peace. For the mindset of the flesh is hostile to God, because it does not submit itself to God's law, for it is unable to do so. Those who are in the flesh cannot please God. You, however, are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God lives in you. But if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to him. Now, if Christ is in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. And if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you, then he who raised Christ from the dead will also bring your mortal bodies to life through his Spirit who lives in you. So then, brothers, we are not obligated to the flesh to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. All those led by God's Spirit are God's sons. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received the Spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. But that chapter goes on, and it speaks all throughout there about how the law of the Spirit and the law of the flesh, or the spiritual nature and the fleshly nature, are constantly at war. It's a struggle back and forth. So as I mentioned earlier about, the idea of, how humility will help us, and then also what the struggles are to be humble. It's that fleshly nature that wants to take over. It's constantly at war. It's wanting to strip us, to take away from what we have. And it was Michael E. DeBakey who said, real success requires respect for and faithfulness to the highest human values: honesty, integrity, self-discipline, dignity, compassion, humility, courage, personal responsibility, courtesy, and human service. As we consider being people who are humble, and there's more I have to get into, and I don't know that I'm going to continue the next show. I generally keep each lesson down to one show, but I know we're running short on time. We just have a few minutes left. So as we consider this of, our struggles to be people of humility, to live out humbleness, and to keep pride from overtaking our lives, what is it that you have found helpful? I know me, it's an ongoing war. It seems like I feel like Paul. The more I do to combat the fleshly nature, the more it wants to take hold of me. But friends, those who have put on Christ, we know how, in spite of this battle, we are saved from the grip of sin. It doesn't have it doesn't own us. Its domain has been broken. So we have the ability to break loose, to break away, excuse me, but not be held bound and chained to that. No. Do you know Christ? Have you learned of him, and have you received his gift? Friend, that is your responsibility, or it's up to you. No one can do it for you. But if we can, accept him, we'll be freed of this domain. Not to say there won't be a struggle, but we will not be bound to it. And within that, we will find that if we look to what Christ has done, we see his example, and we really get really into the word, we can actually get a greater picture to see what Christ went through. And that, my friends, I want to leave you with, because it is in that when you see what Christ did for you, for us, it's hard to be proud. When you think of how low he went, descended to the depths of hell even. He was crucified for us and because of us. And to think that he gave himself up for us. You talk about a picture of humility. Christ is the epitome of humility. And let's try to, allow for him and his example to really soak in, to really take hold of us. And as a result, so pride will shatter and start to break off. Let's be humble. Friends, I thank you for joining us, for being with us today. We here every Thursday, as you know, at 12 noon Eastern, and we hope you'll be back with us next week for another episode of Insights to Incite. Thank you.
Wow, what an insightful show. Thanks for listening in and watching today. If you missed any part of today's show or any other episode, check it out on iHeartRadio, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Now take today's insight and utilize it. Incite yourself to action and to excellence in the week ahead, and join us again next Thursday and every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time for another insightful session with Brandon Lawson as he speaks to us and shares some more insights to incite right here on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV.